Bring the regular assembly meeting to order for February 3rd, 2025. Mr. Kelly, will you lead us in the flag salute, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Smith, would you please do the land acknowledgement?
Yes, happy to, Madam Mayor. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Ganesh Chish.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Bryson.
Present.
Excuse me, I'm using an old list from last year's assembly. I have to modify on the spot. Ms. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Steininger.
Here.
Ms. Scandies is not with us, and Ms. Wall is not with us. Mayor Weldon.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, and Ms. Hale's in the audience, so she could have said here. I figured she was on the list. Anyway, with that, we're going to go to special order of business. We have two proclamations to read tonight, and the first one is for Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. So could I have Sophia and Olivia come up, please? So a group of high schoolers, well, a little weird, brought this to our attention, so this is for them. Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. Whereas all Alaskans have a right to be safe in their homes, communities, schools, and relationships, and whereas Alaska Teens Against Abuse is working to prevent and end violence in our state, and whereas domestic violence and sexual violence are persistent problems in Alaska, including for Alaska teens, and whereas Alaska youth want to learn more about having healthy and safe relationships, and whereas teen dating violence involves the use or threat of emotional, verbal, physical, sexual, and/or other abusive behaviors to hurt, harass, or control another person they have or had a relationship with, and whereas teen dating violence can result in significant harm, including low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, suicide, self-harm, risky or unhealthy behaviors, increased risk of substance misuse and abuse, and low academic performance, and whereas progress can't be made without educating Alaskans about teen dating violence prevention and awareness, and whereas we stand with Alaska Teens Against Abuse and asking leaders at every level across our state to join them in raising awareness about teen dating violence prevention and uplifting teen leader voices and efforts to end violence in our communities. Now therefore, I, Beth A. Weldon, Mayor of the City and Borough of Juneau, Alaska, on behalf of the City and Borough Assembly, do hereby issue this proclamation acknowledging February as Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month in Juneau. Would either of you like to say something, or at least introduce yourselves? There is an echo, so just fair warn you.
So my name is Sophia.
And my name is Olivia, and we are the Juneau ambassadors of Alaska Teens Against Abuse.
So we are a statewide group of teens working to end dating violence in our state, and we will be active during this Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. We have a few campaigns that we're doing, and then we thank you so much for supporting us while we work to end the violence in Alaska.
And Mr. Smith is going to handle the next one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know we may have more than one engineer in the house, but Mr. Yucatel, if you want to join us as an engineer. And other engineers are welcome, if they'd like. Not typical for engineers to probably get to the front of the room and, oh, there we go. Perfect, look at that. Very good. National Engineers Week. Whereas National Engineers Week is celebrated during the week of George Washington's birthday to honor the contributions President Washington, a military engineer and land surveyor, made to engineering. And whereas the 2025 theme, Design Your Future, is both a call to action and a celebration of the limitless possibilities in engineering. And whereas engineers use their scientific and technical knowledge and skills in creative and innovative ways to fulfill society's needs. And whereas engineers face the major technical challenges of our time, from rebuilding towns devastated by natural disasters, cleaning up the environment, and assuring safe and efficient sources of energy, to designing information systems that will speed our country into the future. And whereas the Juneau branch of the American Society of Civil Engineers and the Alaska Capital Engineers are local sponsors of National Engineers Week, celebrating the local accomplishment of Projects of the Year and Engineer of the Year recognitions within the Juneau region. And whereas since 1983, the National Society of Professional Engineers have contributed time, sponsorship, and resources in support of the National Math Counts Competition Series, a competitive mathematics program that promotes mathematical achievements through a series of fun and engaging B-style contests. And whereas the 2025 Juneau Math Counts competition for middle schoolers will be held on February 14th, 2025 at Juneau Douglas High School. And whereas the Juneau branch has established civil engineer and professional engineer scholarships for high school seniors pursuing Bachelor of Science degrees in the engineering science fields. Now, therefore, Beth A. Weldon, Mayor of the City and Borough of Juneau, on behalf of the City and Borough Assembly, does hereby issue this proclamation acknowledging February 16th and 22nd, 2025 as National Engineers Week. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. Next, we'll go to approval of minutes. Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I move that we approve the minutes from July 1st, 2024, July 29th, 2024, December 16th, 2024, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Except for there's one more.
Whoops, sorry about that. And I move we also approve December 17th, the special 2024 Special Assembly meeting for BRH Board and the PC appointment minutes.
Any objection? Seeing none, those are approved. Next, we need to go to the manager for any agenda changes, and there have been a couple, and for the assembly, you have an updated agenda in your red folder. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I do want to point out that the updated agenda, and that's a supplemental item, reflects these changes. Item 31 and 32 of the published agenda, which are protests to Stone Salmon Farms DBA Tree Logic and Stone Salmon Farms DBA Always Red Eye. Our objection to those have been removed because they've become current on their taxes. So you will see in the agenda in your supplemental that those items are on the consent agenda now. The other item in your supplemental packet is an updated, as of 5 p.m. today, copy of the objection rule and a letter from the Department of Health and Social Services reflecting that Bartlett Regional Hospital received their certificate of need for the emergency department project. So no changes from the supplemental agenda, but those are some changes from the published packet.
Thank you, Madam Manager. So with that, we will go public participation on non-agenda items, and we do have a couple. So first we will go to Zoom, and please bring over Dylan Hay. We'll just see how many was on the other list. Let me see one.
Hello?
Mr. Hay, please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dylan Hay, and I'm a resident of the Mendenhall Valley. For the past 5 years, I've been a full-time firefighter paramedic with the fire department and a member of IAFF Local 4303. Tonight, I'm testifying on behalf of the union's executive board to address recruitment and retention concerns that our members are actively facing. When we moved here 5 years ago, my wife found a job at the Juneau School District, and we were looking forward to building a life in the community that we would be serving in. Today, we have a beautiful 6-month-old son and enjoy taking advantage of all the outdoor activities that life in Juneau offers. That being said, life in Juneau has become unattainable for multiple reasons. Chief among those reasons are low wages offered at CCFR, compounded by the ever-increasing burden of making up for an understaffed department. After testing first at a fire department in the lower 48, my wife and I have made an incredibly tough decision to relocate our young family. As I'm sure you're all aware of the 2024 compensation survey commissioned by CBJ, firefighter EMTs at Capital City Fire and Rescue start at just $20 an hour, which is 9% below average pay for this region. For firefighter paramedics like myself, we're even further below average by 19%. Grappling with an underpaying position is certainly stressful, but it becomes too much when compounded by an increasing workload. Not only has our call volume stretched us beyond a reasonable capacity, I've been on scene of multiple incidents where there was vastly inadequate staffing or volunteer response. This leaves on-duty crews to shoulder a burden we are simply not adequately staffed to carry, and quite frankly, we are all tired. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Mr. Hay? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Logan Bolstead. Mr. Bolstead, please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have two minutes.
Good evening. Is the microphone working?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. My name is Logan Balstead. My residence is out the road. I currently serve as the president of the Juneau Career Firefighters Association, IFF Local 4303. Today marks the 33rd year anniversary that our borough combined 5 volunteer departments into one combination career/volunteer fire department. Throughout our 33-year history, our call volume has increased significantly, from somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 calls per year to over 5,000 911 responses per year. Conversely, our volunteer numbers have faded away. Our 24-hour career staffing has not increased to compensate for this loss. This past year, there were 18 structure fires in Juneau, and not one of them met the response standard set by the National Fire Protection Association. And of those 18 fires, only 10 received any additional staffing help beyond the initial on-duty career staff. It is clear that our department struggles to assist the community on many small emergencies, let alone any of moderate to severe impact to the public. Last month, you heard our union vice president testify to staffing and wage issues our fire department is facing and which firefighter paramedic Hay has just expanded on. I would also like to thank the public for their overwhelming support in response to our testimony and subsequent coverage from the local news. We now anticipate that our vacancies will continue to increase over the coming months from previously stated numbers. Multiple members will be retiring, resigning, and even taking extended leave of absences for military service this year. Our staffing is of the 3rd ambulance approved in 2018 by the Assembly will drop from approximately 1/3 of the time to simply non-existent. It is crucial that we have competitive starting wages for recruitment. In the past couple of years, we have had 7 firefighter recruitment cycles where we had at best 1 successful applicant. In others, 14 job offers have been extended, yet none of were accepted. On Friday, we intend to open contract negotiations. And in light of our concerns, we encourage the Assembly to give the city manager direction to assist us with these recruitment and retention crises affecting this critical service to the community of Juneau. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ballstead. Any questions from Mr. Ballstead? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight.
You're welcome.
Next we have Greg Cheney. Mr. Cheney, I think you know how to testify, but please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Greg Cheney, and I live at 715 6th Street in downtown Juneau. And I have a very quick message. I was dismayed that the excellent relationship we have with our sister city neighbors in Whitehorse is being tarnished by federal shenanigans, that's what I'll call it. In light of the current political climate, I want to suggest that the Juneau Assembly send a brief goodwill message to affirm the long historical bond shared between the good citizens of Whitehorse and Juneau. If we're going to argue about something, let's argue about who has the best hockey team or the best brewery. So in spite of what goes on in Washington, D.C. and Ottawa, let's acknowledge the kinship we share as people of the North. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? And just so you know, after our discussion earlier today, I've already directed the city manager to work on a letter. So that was a great idea. Thank you. Next, that's all we have for, that I see for non-agenda. Did anybody else sign up for non-agenda that I didn't see? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any public request for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Seeing none, is there any assembly requests for consent agenda changes? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd move that we move item 21, the University of Alaska Southeast request to lease CBJ property at Floyd Dryden for less than fair market value item to new business.
All right, so noted. Is there any further assembly requests for consent agenda changes? So we'll move on to assembly action. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move the consent agenda as amended and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, so moved. So next we will go to public hearing. Madam Clerk. Item 22.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-40 AM, an ordinance creating a local improvement district number 210, HESCO Barrier Project Phase 1, and appropriating the sum of up to $7,830,000.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In response to the recent Mendenhall River flooding and in coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the City and Borough of Juneau is pursuing advanced flood fighting measures in the form of HESCO barriers to safeguard homes in the Mendenhall Valley. This ordinance creates a local improvement district, LID, which contains all benefited homes in the Phase 1 installation of the HESCO barriers along the Mendenhall River. Using the 16-foot inundation maps, CBJ has identified 466 properties which would be specifically benefited from Phase 1. The project costs are estimated at $7,830,000. The project costs will be split 40-60 between property owners in the City and Borough of Juneau. The Assembly discussed this project on October 21st, 2024, and directed that an ordinance be presented. This ordinance was introduced on November 18th, 2024, and initial public testimony was heard on December 16th, 2024. A public meeting was held at Thunder Mountain Middle School on January 3rd, 2025. Included with the ordinance is a map of included homes and assessment roll, and I want to note that the assessment roll is the assessment roll from introduction. However, the reflected amount is amended in the ordinance and in all of our publications to the $6,292, which reflects the action that the Assembly took at the last public hearing. The packet also includes a list of written objections to the LID by affected homeowners received in writing by the municipal clerk's office as of 2 p.m. on January 30th, and copies of those objections. I'd like to add that the supplemental packet includes all objections it includes a list of all objections that were heard by 4:30 p.m. today on Monday, February 3rd. We don't have a scanned copy in the supplemental of everyone's personal objection, but the clerk's office will be scanning those and entering them as part of the public record and supplemental items, so all of the individual objections are accounted for as public testimony to this meeting. I recommend that the Assembly take public testimony, and at the close, I recommend that the Assembly take public testimony and then recess for 15 minutes so the clerk's office can take a final count of all the objections. So we do have forms in the back of the room if someone's objection didn't get registered, or if they came today planning on only issuing a verbal objection, you do need to object in writing, and so we will make sure that we account for any objections that happen before the close of public testimony. And so the mayor will be closing public testimony after we come back from that recess. And if more than 50% of the property owners who would bear 50% or more of the cost of the improvement do not object, I recommend proceeding with the adoption of the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And just so the public is aware, there is an amendment that we will be looking at to reduce the interest rate to 0 for the first 10 years. With that, we will go to public testimony. Please remember, we're going to hear from both sides today, and this is an emotional issue, so please refrain from clapping, cheering, booing, any kind of that activity, so we can respect everybody's time to have their say. So first we will go to Zoom, and so Madam Clerk, and everybody will have 2 minutes. Please bring over Joseph Little.
State your name and area of town that you live in, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Little, and I live in Mendenhall, River Valley community, River Court, actually. We have concerns about the assessment for the HESCO barriers along Mendenhall River. The river structure has become narrower and less curves because of the glacial sand and fallen trees in the river. And these HESCO barriers could possibly cause even more dangerous conditions than before by narrowing the river further. The project stops at River Court Way, and yet downriver, there is multiple public buildings such as Thunder Mountain, DPAC, the library, the field house, Riverbend, the post office, the Vintage Business Park, and Riverview Senior Living. All of these are potentially threatened, and they're not even being covered by this HESCO barrier. We believe that these properties should be involved in the assessment, and that they should pay for a barrier along their area. In the proposal, there is a 60-40 split between CBJ and homeowners. This is unfairly slanted towards the homeowners, considering that CBJ and the school district has many valuable properties in the immediate area next to the river. Let's see, the property values are in the flood zone have decreased dramatically since the summer of 2023. And CBJ still uses the obsolete property values and asks people to pay very high property taxes. Meanwhile, most houses in this neighborhood require thousands of dollars in repairs because of flood damage from 23 and 24. And the assessment is another big burden on our shoulders. Why can't CBJ have sympathy for the residents who have lived here for decades? The CBJ should pay at least 90% of the HESCO barrier project expenses based on the city properties on the river and millions of property taxes collected by CBJ. Please.
I have to stop you now. You're over your time.
Okay, thank you.
To wrap it up, you can give one more sentence, but we have to stop.
Please vote against the HESCO barrier project when it is time for your decision.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Little? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Sam Hatch. Mr. Hatch, please come up, state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name's Sam Hatch. I live on Meander Way. I'm broke. After years of ambivalence and negligence in floodplain management from the city, we decided to try and retrofit for survival ourselves. It worked, but we don't have enough to finish. My savings, retirement, and investments are all gone. I have 3 mortgages. My wife and I both work, full-time jobs, and you still want more. I'm not the only one in a difficult financial situation. You won't see me at future meetings. I'll be working nights. I need to feed my family, and I need to have some hope of escaping the pile of debt that you so callously want to add to. The reality is maybe I can't pay, but should I have to pay for life-saving emergency work? Shouldn't the city shoulder the burden like avalanche protection, like firefighting or police? I've paid my taxes that cover the 60% that so generously you've agreed to pay, but I'm also paying the 40%. The city has decided emergency services are transactional. Good people don't charge to save others. I support safe, responsible, permitted flood fighting, but the lid is wrong.
Any questions for Mr. Hatch? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Anisha Bingham. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Venetia Bingham, and I live on G Street in the Valley. As an assembly, I feel like you're spending this town into the ground. You are not a board of directors direct the money in the direction that your constituents want you to. It seems like the needs and the needs of the community are not being met. It seems like needs can be, that the assembly can redirect some money. Some projects that seem to be overspent on or were a bad idea to me, the brand new building behind the hospital that is now not in use, $240,000 on 2 dugouts that are the Taj Mahal of dugouts, a broken down gondola that has been sitting on the side of the road resting, and continuing to spend money on Eagle Crest when it should be a private enterprise. The city should not be in a tourism business that is not inherently governmental. Stop funding losing projects. Money that you'll be giving to Eagle Crest could be redirected and save expenses to families who have already been through so much. To have to pay $6,000 on top of all that we have paid for a temporary fix that many feel will not work seems extreme. We have already lost so much. I believe the priorities of the assembly are skewed. Your committee members have lost so much already. That is where our money should be focused. Our property taxes should be covering this expense. Help your community. We are bleeding money and need your help. For those who are not writing or speaking up, because you have lost faith that the assembly will listen to you, please know that many of us hear you, but we encourage you to continue to stand for what is right in our community.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bingham? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Greg Cheney.
Back again so soon. My name is Greg Cheney. I live at 7156 6th Street in downtown. We own a vacant lot. It's 9418 Long Run Drive, which is in the LID. And pursuant to the LID, you have to receive a benefit in order to be included in a LID. First of all, we have nothing there. It's vacant. So our risk is 0 from a flood. Secondly, our property is about 4 feet higher than our neighboring property, which is when the HESCO barrier is on their property. If there is an extreme flood, it will go over the top of that barrier before it reaches the base of the barrier on our property if it was installed. So there's no benefit to us. So we would like to be excused from the LID. But in the spirit of being neighborly, we'd be willing to let it be installed on our property if it's, I was told by the engineer that they all need to be continuous to like a chain, and if you have a break, it won't work. If that's true, we'd be willing to host it, but I don't really need to pay for it. And I wanted to say a quick good word for Carlton, who works for engineering, who came out to our property. working with someone who wasn't very thrilled about the whole thing, and I would say he had excellent customer service, so just like to give props to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? And thank you for calling out Carl. Next, we have Michelle Hale. Ms. Hale, state your name and area, town you live in for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Michelle Hale, and I live in the Valley. Thank you, Assembly, for addressing this issue and staff. This has been, as we are hearing tonight, so hard on so many, many people, and I'm really sorry about all of the suffering that has happened. I believe that the HESCO barriers are the best solution we have right now, and we need to act right now. Those raging waters are going to be here before we know it, and we don't have a choice of not acting. You have consulted the experts, the Army Corps of Engineers. They say this is the best immediate solution. And we know that we need longer-term solutions, and we know there are those. Maybe it's a dike, but we can't do that in time for the 2025 flood. Staff in the Assembly have put together one way to pay for this, and I know it's caused a lot of consternation. I think it's a good solution, but maybe it's not the best solution, maybe not exactly what I would have done. What we have is the CBJ residents are paying 60% of the cost, all CBJ residents, and on top of that, the people in the LID are paying an additional 40%. I might have advocated to do something a little differently, like more people in the Valley paying. I would have paid. But you had to do something. You had a really hard balancing act, and you didn't have maps of other people that would be affected. You've done the best job you could. I'm sorry this is happening to our city, and I thank you again for stepping up and dealing with this head on, which is what we need to do. So thank you to everyone.
Any questions for Mrs. Hale? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Bill Diebels. Please state your name and area, town you live in for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Bill Diebels, 9342 Betty Court. Of the approximately 84 properties planned for HESCO installation, roughly 25% submitted objections by last Thursday too. While it is certainly their right to object, if doing so for aesthetic or access reasons, my opinion is that those reasons are short-sighted and selfish. I doubt any are doing so for financial reasons, although Sam acknowledged. And if so, the mayor's proposed 0% interest rate amendment may mitigate that. Objections related to a desire to move more quickly on a permanent solution are simply not practical. Philosophical objections related to CBJ overreach or irresponsible allocation of resources might have merit, but with regard to the HESCO barriers, I believe CBJ is doing as much as possible to provide the most protection with the least risk at a reasonable cost.
Any questions for Mr. Diebels? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Jack Marshall. First of all, thank you for your service, and please state your name and area town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
I have a hard time hearing you, Mayor.
Sorry.
This is Jack Marshall. I lived at 9329 Turn Street. I want to first say that the LID, as you have developed it, and you're well aware, I'm sure, that it doesn't meet the definition of a LID. And it's just a way to pay for a temporary fix, which we didn't ask for either. We asked for a permanent fix. So I think that if you want to pay for your temporary fix, you should get a federal grant. FEMA was cut by Trump pretty heavily, and I think the very next step would probably be the Corps of Engineers because of their terrific amount of failures one after the other. Almost every major river the Corps has failed on. A really good example probably is the Vanport in Portland, Oregon, which I happen to live through. And there was over 10,000 people lost their homes, and many lives were lost because of the Corps of Engineers. They have all the navigable rivers. That's their charge, but Mendenhall River is not navigable, so what are they doing here? What the Assembly needs is an RFP with strict guidelines to develop a permanent fix. We should only consider Alaskan engineering companies to do the work. A very tight line needs to be set in the contract. In this community, great engineering has been done by local companies. Many examples are out there, but probably some of the two biggest ones is the Juneau Douglas Bridge, which the guy who did that also went on to develop the Golden Gate, and the Salmon Creek Dam, which also became a model for one of the biggest dams down south. So let's get our own people to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Marshall? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Steve Bauer. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Sure. My name is Steve Bauer. I live at 9416 Long Run Drive. Ironically, I live right on the river, but suffered absolutely no damage. My house is located approximately 22 feet above flood stage, and so I object to being included in the LID. I did not vote on the LID issue because since I was not impacted, I didn't feel it was fair to so many of my neighbors that have been severely impacted. I think the decision should be made by those who have suffered financially from this. Also, I object to the LID. I don't see how I can be included because I would not benefit from it. The proposed HESCO barrier would bisect my property, dividing the area that's lower close to the river and letting it flood as it did previously and offering no protection at the level I'm at. They're proposing to put it at 18, 19 feet above flood stage, and I don't see how that would help anything. Thank you for your consideration. I know it's a very difficult issue. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Bauer? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Lawton Knight. Okay, and is Mr. Baptiste going to talk about the LID? Okay, next we have Debbie Fisher.
I'm Debbie Fisher. I live on G Street in the Valley. I'm deeply troubled at what is happening tonight. I remain unconvinced that the city and the Corps have done their homework before charging ahead with the HESCOs. The Corps said a study is needed to be sure the barriers don't cause a flood of the lower river, but the lid vote is here now and there's no study. Cart before the horse again. Think about it. The water that jumped the banks and flooded the valley last summer will now be held back by the barriers traveling faster and higher because it's contained. The barriers will end at River Court, and then what? Hydraulic jumps is the name, I believe. I'm concerned about the homes, condos, and businesses at the end of the river. There are millions in city infrastructures also, from the library and the pool all the way down to Don Abel's and the wastewater treatment plant. Many of these businesses are going to hold you responsible for your decisions tonight. Are you prepared to answer when their properties flood? The cost is also a serious concern. $30 million, and we don't even know who pays phase 2. At what, $22 million? Is this fiscally responsible and in this order and manner? Can the citizens bear the burden of any more unknown costs? The lid is not the right mechanism for this project. It isn't an improvement. This is a huge opposition. There is huge opposition to placing these barriers on private property. Is the city ready for the legal battles over eminent domain, reimbursement, and validity of the lid? I'm completely disheartened when it comes to the city's floodplain management plan and the status of permits and floodway compliance. It is time for transparency and an open book on what has happened. It's so concerning that the city is in an audit stage and not up to standards with their own floodplain plan and FEMA regarding permit work and floodways on the river. Why is it there are no permits for the proposed HESCO's installation? CBJ needs to comply and follow FEMA agency guidelines and their own floodplain plan. Sadly, this ordinance has tried to divide our flood community, and I will do my best to turn that around. There are no winners or losers in this ordinance. We all lose because we are flood victims. I remain laser focused on my congressional delegation and the path to a fast-track, long-term solution. That is where the hope lies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fisher? Thank you for your testimony tonight. And then, Ms. Hurst, do we have anybody else signed up back there? Okay, and next we have Elizabeth Figgis. Please state your name and area town you live in the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Elizabeth Figgis. I live at 9350 View Drive. I'm here tonight to implore you to please remove any interest rate on any amount of charges that you give to homeowners in the LID district. I am not in the LID. I also personally believe that this should be something funded by the city. My biggest concern about the LID after experiencing 2 years in a row of catastrophic flooding with no end in sight for my home is actually that we've had 5 months of delay now in action and real planning for the next flood season and planning HESCO because of this LID process. I heard back in the first time that this was presented, we were going to be looking at ballot measures and other ways to fund HESCO Phase 2 and future work on the HESCO. I haven't heard that since, and I actually could not even find the minutes posted on the website for a couple months this fall, so I wasn't able to fully look through and figure out where that's at right now. It's upsetting to find out that our city manager is getting raises to well above $200,000 a year, and we can't even afford CCFR, who we desperately need during future floods. The delay of our hazard mitigation plan not starting until this month has meant my home is not eligible for the many grants that could be applied for to help with mitigation. And I have nothing to base other private grant applications on that shows what our city supports for my property. We also aren't eligible right now for EPA pollution prevention grants to try to raise fuel tanks throughout the valley. That's something I think is really urgent to prepare for future flooding. There was no action that I saw last year from the Assembly or City Manager Office to alert people in the valley about how to get NFIP. I've actually heard of certain residents who were told by their insurance companies they weren't eligible, who then got flooded this year. We have houses that are split level homes that are facing potential only partial coverage, and people need answers. We need to get back to work on this as a community. So please remove the LID % interest rate, and let's get back to work on actually planning for a flood for once.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Figgis? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, Madam Clerk, that's the last we have, so we will take a 15-minute, sorry, Ms. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city clerk is informing that it is important to officially close public testimony before we do a count. Otherwise, it is difficult for her to be able to get an official count. So I would ask that we close public testimony before adjourning for recess.
Madam Mayor, if we could hold on just a moment, we have one potential additional testifier.
We'll take a 2-minute at ease.
On objecting, we have to have that in writing in order for it to be counted as an objection. My deputy clerk has forms at the back. If you have not already submitted something in writing testifying and saying whether you're for or against is not enough for this process, it does require it to be in writing. And so in order to count every single person's objection, we need that in writing, please.
From our at ease, and we are officially closing public testimony at 7:50 PM. And we will now take a 15-minute recess. Madam Clerk, would you give us a count?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have received 117 objections to the local improvement district, and that is 117 properties, not necessarily 117 individuals, because there are some individuals who have more than one property subject to the LID. So this is the count for how many property objections we've received.
All right, thank you for that, which is below the 51%, correct?
That's accurate, and we do plan on publishing the list as soon as we have a few moments to do so under supplemental materials, so anyone looking for their name can find it on that list.
Thank you, and before we go to the assembly, Madam Manager, when I was talking to some people, there seems to be a rumor out that there was lots of undelivered packets. You want to address that, please, so we could get it on the record?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have the body turn to page 2 of 03 of their packet, which is the affidavit. It's certified mail and outreach efforts. This is required to be included in your packet by the city clerk. Really outlines the extensive follow-up that CBJ staff did to ensure there's proper notification. 458 certified mailers were sent to residents. Recall there are 8 properties that are owned by the city and borough of Juneau. Of those 458 certified mailers, 13 were returned undelivered. So 7 of these were recent new certified mailers, which were all successfully delivered. Then those dates are listed in the affidavit. Of the 13 that we couldn't successfully deliver, we hung door hangers on their doors on January 17th. There was 1 remaining undelivered mailer, and that we were able to contact that owner by phone. Additionally, we had 33 certified mailers that were not marked as delivered by USPS. So they were not marked undelivered, they were just not marked as delivered. And door hangers were left at those addresses. Additionally, we did work to, cross-reference utility billing and other records to make sure that we could get any new information, to attempt all those homeowners via phone and email, and contacted 17 of those residents by email between December 31st and January 17th. So I just wanted to let the public know that that is in the packet, and that is kind of a summary of the outreach that was done above and beyond what's required in code.
Thank you for that, Madam Manager. Okay, so next we will go to the assembly. Are there any questions before we go to statements and a vote? We've talked about this quite a bit. You have a question, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I was thinking about the testimony from Mr. Cheney, how he was mentioning that his property is unimproved, and he doesn't believe that he should be in the lid. I'm wondering, this question would go to the attorney, is there a mechanism that we can put in place, and would it need to be done today in order to set up criteria for people to be excluded from the lid if they meet certain conditions?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, through the chair. So this is a 2-step process, the lid assessment rules. You can make an amendment tonight to exclude properties if that's what you wish to do. But to answer your second question, you do not have to do that tonight. It doesn't preclude you from making changes later. There's a second process after the project is completed. All of the receipts and costs are put together. A second assessment role is then created. Notice is sent out. There is another hearing with another opportunity for the public to object. So for that one, you can there's another hearing, and you can correct, revise, raise, lower, change, or modify the role. You can then do a resolution with all of those things. So you certainly could do something tonight,
or you could do it at that second set for the assessment roll.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, well then we'll go for assembly action. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2024-40 amended, an ordinance creating a local improvement district number 210, HESCO Barrier Project Phase 1, and appropriating the sum of $7,830,000. And I'd like to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Very good. I'd like to move the amendment that would, on page 298 of our packets. On behalf of Mayor Weldon, who had this drafted, this reduces the interest rate for the properties in question to 0, and then for the first 10 years for the 4 properties that are have the larger assessment, the 50,000. So it reduces the interest rate for those 4 properties to 0 for the first 10 years. And then it increases to 4.78% thereafter.
Any questions on the amendment? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my question would be to you, and I was just interested to know your reasoning about why you inserted the 4.78% for after 10 years for those 4 properties that are over 50,000.
Sure, so I'll speak to that since Mr. Smith probably can't speak to that on the assembly. Not having the interest rate, while it helps the homeowners, does hurt us because we are getting an interest rate on the money. So if we left the money in a bank, we'd be getting an interest rate. So I felt 30 years was too long to let money go without earning any interest whatsoever. And I'm also hopeful that somewhere along the line we can get some more funding and hopefully relieve some of that burden. All right, so now we're going to, in regards to the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll go back to the main motion as amended. Any objections? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just an objection to make a comment, I guess. This has obviously been a challenging issue that has faced our community and the people directly affected and many others who are sympathetic and compassionate to what people who are flooded or are in this area have been experiencing. So I think it's an imperfect solution. We have data scarcity, but this is the project that's been presented to us by the experts, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, on what can be done before the 2025 flood season to hopefully protect these homes and these properties. Again, it is imperfect. We're all striving for a longer term solution, but unfortunately that is just going to take more time than any of us want. But that is the situation that we face. So I'm very compassionate. I mean, the costs borne by these folks, by our neighbors, have been high already, and I only will support this motion and support this ordinance that adds additional costs reluctantly, but I think it's the best we can do in the time that we had before the next flood season. So I just wanted to share that, but I will remove my objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think you speak for all of us. So without any objection, that ordinance passes. But I will relay what Mr. Smith said. We are continually working on the long-term solution. We have quite a bit of process going with that already. And I imagine that we'll be heading back to Washington, D.C. or here within the next month or two. And just to let you know, when you go to Washington, D.C., it's not a vacation. We literally fly there that night, have the next day all of meeting, have half a day of a meeting, and then fly back. So between 4 hours of time zones and trying to be there just for a day and a half, it is not a fun time. So I know that some people have laughed and said, oh, you guys just get to take vacations to DC. It's not vacation going through 4 time zones and return in 4 days. But also we will continue to pursue other funding mechanisms. and share that with the homeowners the best we can. And the reason I'm putting a little bit of a caveat there is sometimes you get funds that have restrictions to them that we may or may not be able to share. And with that, Ms. Kester, would you talk about a couple of the ones that we're looking at or we're trying to get very hard right now?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Weldon. So we actually have a really good resource on the flood website that is a list of the different grants and their status. So you'll, we have, and some of them are in reference to the short-term solution of phase 1 and phase 2 of flood mitigation, and some of them are in reference towards the long-term solution. So we've been working with Central Council and the tribe on some grant funds through HUD, and that one of those grants has been awarded. We've been working with, for the longer term solution, working with the Forest Service, $1 million. The Forest Service has gotten us $1 million to do advanced work in advance of the LID. We, of course, are advocating for, we were included in federal legislation in the American Recovery Act. The language was included for our disaster, but now we need to advocate for our work plan. And so we being the City and Borough of Juneau, but also Army Corps of Engineers Alaska District, is advocating for $10 million in order to do our general investigation study to look for a long-term solution. And that is a number that the Army Corps of Engineers came up with. We are also working with HUD on some disaster recovery funds that will be funneled through the state. And so we have a meeting with the tribe, working in concert with the tribe and the state on some disaster recovery funds. Those take a long time to get to us. So, figuring out what we can use those funds for. But again, that was an award that was made in the American Recovery Act. We have a number of other grants that we've requested. We're also working with DEC on a low-interest loan for this particular appropriation. So that low-interest loan would allow us, to save on an interest rate because they would be able to give it to us below market and possibly have a portion of that loan forgiven because of the type of loan it is. So it's a good resource for those of you who are really kind of been spending the time researching and forwarding us grant ideas, and just want to assure the public that we are really trying to turn over every stone to look for additional funding sources for both short and long-term mitigation.
Thank you, Madam Manager. So with that, we'll move on to Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, and thank you, Manager Kester, for kind of going through all the different mechanisms that we're looking for to find funding. Before we move on, I just wanted to ask if there's anything that the public, our constituents, can do to join those efforts, any sort of advocacy that would be, or partnership that would be helpful.
Madam Manager.
Thank you, Assemblymember Kelly. I mean, I think the advocacy that the public has done with our delegation, and frankly, our delegations, really hard work on our behalf is why we're even able to have these conversations with OMB and the Assistant Secretary to the Army. Those are the decision makers for our funding. I don't know that that I have a good email address for kind of onslaughting those individuals with our concerns. And I guess I would say we will make sure that people are involved as we do apply for different funding sources, because I think absolutely we will be needing that support. And it's the story that I'm able to tell to these agencies is all the work that all the individuals, many of them in this room are doing, all the, work as a community that we're pulling together, response and a recovery and mitigation. And that really does go a long way in telling our story.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to item 23, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters AA, an ordinance appropriating up to $100,000 to the manager for a loan to Broco Holdings LLC for 220 Front Street, funding provided by the Affordable Housing Fund.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
During the fall 2024 Round 4 competition of the Juneau Affordable Housing Fund, 2 projects were awarded funding through a competitive funding round. The awardees were announced at the November 4, 2024 Land, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting. The 220 Front Street Apartment project was approved at the December 16, 2024 Assembly meeting. This project is seeking to build 20 units of affordable to households making 80% of the area median income. During the initial competition, this project placed second and was awarded the remainder of the available competitive funds in the amount of $1 million. Because the original request was for $1.1 million, it was not fully funded. The Assembly at its December 16th meeting requested full funding of this project by awarding the additional $100,000 to meet the $1.1 million request. This project meets the intent of the Juneau Affordable Housing Fund Award Guidelines document and the 2016 Housing Action Plan. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its January 7, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Our public is pretty much gone. Seeing none, we'll move it to the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, lowercase b, uppercase A, appropriating $100,000 to the manager for a loan to Broco Holdings, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Any objection? Seeing none, that ordinance passes. Item 24, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, B. An ordinance appropriating $5 million to the manager for the Aurora Harbor Improvements Capital Improvement Projects. Grant funding provided by the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $5 million of grant funds from the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities Harbor Facility Grants Program. This funding would provide support for Phase 4 of the Aurora Harbor project. Phase 4 project work includes the installation of new main walks J and K in the north end of the basin, completing the head wall float to reconnect the north parking lot to the harbor, updating the gangway, electrical system, lighting, potable water, and fire suppression systems, and installing a new T-float on Main Walk H. The local match requirement will be met with existing 2017 and 2022 1% sales tax and harbor enterprise fund balance. Docks and Harbors anticipates a bid award in February of 2025. The use of 2017 1% sales tax funds is consistent with the intent of the proposition approved by voters in the October 4, 2016 municipal election. The use of 2022 1% sales tax funds is consistent with the intent of the proposition approved by voters in the October 4, 2022 municipal election. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its January 7, 2025 meeting, and the Docks and Harbor Board reviewed and recommended approval of this request at the January 30, 2025 regular meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it to the Assembly. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, B, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 25, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, C. An ordinance appropriating $7,520 to the manager for a grant to Juneau Economic Development Council, funding provided by general funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Juneau Economic Development Council's property at 612 West Willoughby Avenue, Suite A, does not qualify for CBJ's nonprofit property exemption in 2024 because they did not submit their exemption application timely. As a result, property taxes cannot be exempted for 2024 and must be paid by JEDC. This is an unanticipated financial burden for JEDC. This grant would, in effect, acknowledge the intended nonprofit purpose of 612 West Willoughby Avenue, Suite A, even though it did not meet the strict legal criteria to be exempted. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this request at its January 7, 2025 meeting, and the Assembly Finance Committee reviewed this request at the January 8, 2025 meeting and forwarded it to the Assembly for a public hearing and Assembly action. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Steininger.
I move the Assembly adopt Ordinance 2024-01-BAC and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm objecting for a purpose of statement. JDC owns that building. They've been there for a long time. Is there a mechanism that we can let an organization that we give grant funding to, that we have a higher expectation than, I mean, this is silly that we're having to deal with this, and this is a business, this is a nonprofit that's been operating in Juneau for at least 2 decades. Not the most appropriate use of all of our time. But if there's nothing we can do about it, then I'm going to remove my objection.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I'm actually going to object for a little bit different reasons. JEDC has lots of staff and they have the word economic in their name. And so if they, I find it appalling that they let this drop through the cracks. So I'm going to object. So Madam Clerk, we have a motion and objection. Please call the roll.
Mr. Steininger,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Adkisson,
No.
Mr. Bryson,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Weldon.
No.
Motion fails, 4 yeas, 3 nays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have item 26.
This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, letter I, an ordinance appropriating $8,900,000 to the manager for the Bartlett Regional Hospital Emergency Department Addition Capital Improvement Project, funding provided by hospital funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $8.9 million of hospital funds for the Emergency Department Addition Capital Improvement Project. This appropriation is required to move the project forward to meet the desired spring 2025 construction start date. This funding is considered restricted until a certificate of need is obtained from the Alaska Department of Health, which is a requirement for renovation and reconstruction projects expected to exceed $1.5 million. I will note that to deviate from the MR a little bit, because this letter approving the certificate of need was received today and is included in your packet. So that requirement has been met. The hospital board approved this request at the July 23rd, 2024 meeting, and the Public Works and Facilities Committee reviewed this request at the August 5, 2024 meeting, and the Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed the ordinance at its September 17th, 2024 meeting. The Assembly Finance Committee reviewed the request at the September 4 and January 8th meetings. As you recall, at the January 8th meeting, the Assembly Finance Committee made a motion to refer the ordinance back to the Assembly for public hearing and Assembly action upon receipt of the certificate of need from the state of Alaska, which, as I noted, has been received. I do want to mention that Bartlett Regional Hospital CEO Jill Warner is online if you have any questions. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. And as you said, we have our CEO, Mr. Warner, on the line if we need to ask any questions. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll move it to the Assembly. Ms. Hall.
I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, lowercase b, uppercase I, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing no objection, that ordinance passes. Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Warner. Next, we have item 27.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-08, an ordinance authorizing the manager to execute an agreement with Alaska Electric Light and Power Company and AJT Mining Properties Incorporated for the purpose of an access easement for the Christopher Trail.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
Parks and Recreation has been working with ALNP and AGT Mining Properties to improve recreational access between Cope Park and the Gold Creek Flume by relocating an 86-foot-long timber bridge from Katsagowini Dai Brotherhood, butchered that, apologies, Brotherhood Bridge Trail to Cope Park. A new trail connection can be made. This connection will require crossing approximately 250 feet of property owned by AJT. AJT has offered an easement at no cost. Alaska Statute 0965-202 provides for a level of indemnification for landowners that allow recreational use of their land without charge. Ordinance 2025-01 allows the manager to execute an agreement and allows an exception to the general prohibition on indemnification. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its January 7, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Before I move this ordinance, I did have a question regarding it.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was wondering what the plan would be to replace so we're moving the bridge from Coxsackie Brotherhood Bridge Trail to Cope Park. Would you know what our plans are to replace it or any on that trail?
Who's taking that one?
So do you want to go for it? Here.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Kelly. I am near certain, but will verify and send you an email confirmation that that is an ongoing project that is currently being worked on. So the old bridge is being moved and there's a new bridge being constructed.
Thank you. And I am nearly certain that it's just a bigger bridge because I think there was a little bit of a washout, and so the current bridge was no longer able to do it, and actually I think fell down. So.
Thank you. In that case, I'm ready to make my motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the Assembly adopt Ordinance 2025-08 and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 28, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance amending ordinance serial 2024-42 regarding the proposed refinancings by the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank of various revenue bonds of the city and borough authorized thereunder.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance is an amendment to Ordinance 2024-42, which authorized the refinancing of 3 bonds through the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank. The amendment is necessary as the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank is consolidating principal due dates to the month of December, which changes the payment schedule from March to December and alters the years of maturities in CBJ's issuances. This ordinance adjusts the maturity years for Alaska Municipal Bond Bank's due date changes. Ordinance 2024-42 authorized the issuance of up to $13.5 million in bonds to refund or refinance the 2014 A Port, 2015 Harbor, and 2021 Port bonds. The original bonds were sold through the Alaska Municipal Bond Bank and financed harbor improvements, seawalk construction, and cruise ship berth enhancements. Ordinance 2024-42 was approved on December 16, 2024. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Heather Marlowe, I live in Ock Bay here.
And I wanted to talk about this. I understand that this is in process and we're kind of catching up on some details here, but I kind of have questions that are about the bigger process. And the payoff of 16B, I think, may be affected by this. It's not clear to me if the payoff of 16B is affected, but it is ripe for its first opportunity for payoff in FY26. And so I'm not sure from the language or the ordinance if the payoff date for 16B changes, but it would appear to. And so it goes back to a recommendation to the, not a recommendation, identification to the VIT-TIF when it was convened last, that your attorney identified payoff of 16B as mitigation for some of the negative impacts of tourism. And what it allows for is, more self-direction and flexibility with 16B, the cruise ship berth, and the sea walk after you pay off the debt. So I'm a little bit confused on where we are just in general with paying off 16B, which is FY26, the first time we can do it. There's large interest that was assigned with that bond. One of my ideas was to capture that interest with an early payoff of 16B and use that towards acquisition of Merchants Wharf and continuing to sea walk to Centennial Hall. There's about $15 million in interest that was there. If you capture that with early payoff, you're well towards that project. I thought it would allow diversity on the waterfront to pay off 16B, and I think it speaks to an increasing trend that I'm seeing in your surveys of 40% disapproval from people that are responding to the survey for the negative impacts of tourism. So I have questions in general about 16B, what's happening with the payoff, and then the description of the ordinance. There's also a change to some sort of 25% plus or minus payment as the years progress. I wasn't clear on that either, but those are my comments.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. And unfortunately, Mr. Yukino, our port director, has left because his ordinance passed, and because I have no idea where we are with 16B, how close we are. But anybody else want to testify to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the assembly. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2025-12, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Mr. Bryson.
For purpose of question, Madam Mayor, roughly how much money are we saving by doing this refinancing? Do we have any of that information?
Ms.
Yeah, so I understand it's in the neighborhood of $20,000 from what we saved when we passed the ordinance like 1 month ago. So this, we were already saving a significant chunk by refinancing those 3 bonds. And if you recall, that ordinance passed, we were like, yay, saving money. And then the bond bank modified their schedule, and the finance director was like, well, we could save another $20,000 if we did it again. And so the kind of increased savings for immediately kind of scheduling our payments is about $20,000. But there's greater savings in the refinancing that you did just a month ago.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I'll remove my objection.
Thank you. See no further objection, that ordinance passes, and thank our finance director for looking out for us. Every bit counts at this point. So with that, we'll go through unfinished business, our goals. Who's taking that on? Mr. Barr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you have the final draft version of your goals in the packet. There were 3 goals that Assembly members were working on, fine-tuning the language. Other than that, these are the same goals that you saw the last time this was before you. The 3 are goal number 1D under housing. So that one has been, the wording has been changed. The new wording is continue aggressive use of the Affordable Housing Fund, review and potentially adjust fund guidelines to set affordable housing criteria, support successful projects, and meet community housing needs. The second one is goal 3E under sustainable budget. This one is The new wording is examine purpose and effectiveness of city tax code and policies resulting in tax exemptions, tax credits, or any foregone revenue. And then the final one that was being reviewed by the Assembly is Goal 4F. And the language on that one is advocate for programs that strengthen families with children aged 0 to 3. And the action before you tonight is to either adopt at the will of the body, send back to committee, or further revise, and potentially other options. And I'll just take the liberty also to mention that I got a lifeline on Mr. Kelly's question earlier, and the new bridge is constructed and open, was completed by DOT in October.
Thank you.
Right, we've seen these quite a bit, so for action, we'll move them to Mr. Bryson. Do you want to make a motion to adopt?
Yes, I move that we adopt the assembly goals as amended.
Any objection? Seeing none, our goals are adopted, so that's what we will aspire for this year. Next, we have under new business, item 30. Madam Clerk. And we'll, just for the assembly, we'll finish this item and then we'll take a break.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the Baptiste application to purchase CBJ property on Taku Boulevard.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In July 2024, Alan Baptiste submitted an application to the Lands Office with a request to purchase CBJ property adjacent to his house, which is located at 4128 Taku Boulevard. The application noted that the, quote, land would be 7 feet wide and 100 feet long. This land is located near the headwaters of Duck Creek and is managed by the Parks Department. The sale of the land would resolve an encroachment issue for Mr. Baptiste. CDD reviewed this request and provided the following information. The boat shed building permit was not in the electronic system, and imagery shows no sheds in 2006, a rear shed in 2013, and full rear and side shed 5 foot into CBJ land in 2023. Since the owner purchased around 1988, it appears he built sheds. His boats are parked on CBJ parkland. Duck Creek is less than 50 feet from the boat shed. Duck Creek has a 50-foot setback requirement. Since there does not appear to be a building permit, the shed cannot be certified non-conforming. This property was dedicated by the Assembly as part of the Juneau Parks and Open Space System and is managed as a conservation area due to its proximity to Duck Creek. It is not consistent with CBJ adopted master plan or the comprehensive plan to resolve the encroachments by disposing of parks managed property. The 2016 Land Management Plan designates this property as to be retained. If the Assembly determines that this application should be further considered, then the application would be forwarded to the PRAC and the Planning Commission for review prior to the Assembly authorization. The Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee reviewed this application and recommended the property be retained by CBJ. I recommend the Assembly adopt a motion to deny this application to purchase the property adjacent to Duck Creek in accordance with the motion passed at the December 2nd, 2024 Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting.
Thank you, Madam Manager, and we have two people that want to testify to this. First, we have Lawton Knight. Please step to the mic, state your name and area town you live in for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
So my name is Lawton Knight, also known as Dutch Knight with Southeast Alaska Real Estate. Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Thank you, Assembly members, for what you do. Thank you, city staff, for what you do. I have been in the people helping business most of my life, as an entrepreneur, as a real estate agent, as a real estate broker, as a school teacher, coach, a school bus driver, school bus aide. I've tried to apply myself in that way, helping people. I also believe that you guys are in the helping people business, and I believe that my client, the Baptiste, Patricia can't be here tonight, need a little bit of help. So we discovered in the sale of their home that their survey, the original survey, was off 10 feet. And so they have a structure on their property that's 1.5 feet over the property line. So we're asking for 7 feet from the city so that we can have a normal side yard setback of 5 feet and have a normal situation. We're asking for your mercy in this situation. I've dealt with lots of different real estate transactions. Surveys are sometimes off. The original survey should have been verified by the city when they did the final certificate of occupancy. So the city failed, the original surveyor failed. Did the homeowner fail here? Possibly. Did some of their hired contractors fail? Possibly. But again, I'm appealing to you for mercy and for help. We have a buyer and they would like to close on this home by the end of April. So we really need your help. Patricia Baptiste has worked at the hospital for 18 years, for first student for 5 years, working with special ed kids. Mr. Baptiste has given his life at times to doing repairs for people and not charging them for the work or the materials. I would ask the Assembly adopt the motion that we have in Mr. Baptiste's letter. I would ask that somebody make that motion, second that motion, and that you would approve it with unanimous consent. And that would be that I move the CBJ grant Baptiste 700 square feet of land, a 7 by 100 foot strip of land adjacent to their property commonly known as 4128 Taku Boulevard, Juneau, Alaska 99801. This land grant would solve an encroachment problem, providing for a normal side yard setback and allow the current intended purchaser of the property to obtain financing, title insurance without any problems. These folks are going to move south.
You can finish your last statement if you'd like.
And this land grant will end up benefiting the future owners and future buyers and sellers of that property.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Knight? Mr. Bryson and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Knight, I understood that you had a petition for neighbors surrounding that property. Could you maybe speak to what that petition stated and the number of neighbors that you contacted or responded to that?
Mr. Knight.
So the petition states to Mayor Beth Weldon, Assembly Representatives, each one is listed regarding Baptiste's application for 700 square feet of land of CBJ land. We support and recommend the granting of 700 square feet of CBJ land to the Baptistes to help solve their encroachment problem at 4128 Taku Boulevard due to extenuating circumstances which will benefit future buyers and sellers of the property, commonly known as 4128 Taku Boulevard, Juneau, Alaska 99801. We have 40 signatures on this here in the City Assembly chambers. There's also a petition at Mr. Baptiste's home that he didn't bring that has a few more signatures. Everyone that we asked to sign this petition gladly signed this petition. We didn't have anyone say no.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Knight, I mean, I realize it has been a long time since that survey was conducted, but I mean, is there any recourse for someone doing an improper survey? I mean,
I'm not an attorney, but I mean, you know, somebody could sue the people that did the survey, you know, they could. Somebody could sue the city for not certifying that the survey was accurate at the time they finalized the building inspection and gave the certificate of occupancy.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Mr. Baptiste. So please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. And the mic's still on, and you have 3 minutes.
Name is Alan Baptiste, and I live at 4128 Taku Boulevard. And I'm here hoping that the city might be able to help me with the property line problem that I 4.5 months ago, found out that I have a problem because for the 37 years living there, had no idea I had a problem when I bought the property from the state. And according to Toner and Nordling's as-built, from my existing two-car garage, it's 22 feet over on the other side of my boats was my property line, which, where the boats are, led me to believe that I was on my property, which now it's not the case. Now it says that I'm on the city's property now, according to John Beam's survey. I'm hoping that the city can assist me in my application on purchasing this 7 feet by 100 feet to settle this problem that I have now with the property line issue. So that's what I'm pleading the city for.
Any questions for Mr. Baptiste, Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Baptiste, I just want you to tell us, when you built this, you truly believe that you were building it within the rules of city building? They've mentioned that there wasn't a permit. Could you maybe just give us a little explanation of how this shed got to be in the location that it is, sir?
Let me make this clear. When I bought the property in '89, the boat shed was there, although it was in ill repair. So over the years, I did repairs to the boat shed. But what I added to was the carport in the front of the boat shed. And I started with, as everyone knows, those tents that everyone has seen. What happens to those tents? They cave, they snow loads. So I started with the tent, but I put sonotubes and creosoted posts. And then it evolved because the roof caved in. So then I put the walls up with Lexan walls, which are still there. But then 2 years after that, I put a roof on. So that carport evolved after 3 years from a tent to what it is now. And yes, I did that without a permit. But I went to the city here, I don't know, maybe longer, 7 months ago, to get a permit after the fact. But they told me that I couldn't get a permit, but I got the applications after the fact. But they said because I have a property line issue, I couldn't get one until that property line issue was corrected. So here I am with the catch-22.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Smith, right?
Thank you. Mr. Baptiste, how much would you estimate it would cost to put up a similar shed that is not crossing the property line?
What was the question?
I guess the question is, what was your estimated cost to essentially right this situation by either, tearing down the current shed and putting up one that actually that falls within the appropriate setbacks?
Probably about $40,000. What I have there cost me $75,000 to build.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Baptiste? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your testimony. Who done?
Thank you.
Mr. Debels, do you want to say something? Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Bill Diebels, 9342 Betty Court. Wasn't planning to speak to this. When I was reviewing the packet, I guess my attitude was, not following the rules, deny. But after listening to the situation, I feel like a waiver is appropriate in this case, and so I guess I would advocate for the assembly to grant the 7-foot by 100-foot slice of land.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Who has questions on the assembly? Mr. Bryson and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Manager. My question is is an easement or some way that we could account for the 1.5 feet of the building being over the property line? Is there a mechanism that we can use, like an easement or something that I'm not aware of, so that we could have I completely understand what they're asking for. They're just trying to get out of this pickle and get the property sold, so that way we can continue solving our housing situation. This is exactly what we're talking about. Families retiring somewhere else, new family moving into that house. Is there a way that we can help 2 families with this one situation with like a 2-foot easement in a small section of property? Do we have any mechanisms available for us? Please.
Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. So the main mechanism would be the negotiated sale or lease. You can direct the manager's office to negotiate that sale. You can give them guidance as to what you want that to look like, how much space, and kind of the parameters there. That is the main mechanism. There may be some other land use options, but because they're trying to sell, the most straightforward way to do that, to ensure that they can sell the home, is to do the negotiated lease, or the negotiated sale, sorry.
Who else has questions? Mr. Kelly, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is also for the attorney. So assuming that we were to approve or authorize the manager to negotiate the sale today, would Mr. Baptiste be able to, at that point, retroactively get a permit, or would he need to at that point?
Madam Attorney.
Thank you for the question. So I think the sound is really bad, so I think you asked about the permit.
Yes, I was asking basically, would he be able to retroactively be able to get the permit that to build the shed, and or really would it even be necessary to do so?
Right. So there are still some problems with the permit. I can't tell you one way or another whether the permit would be granted because of its location and the location to the creek. Would it solve the problem of getting one step closer with CDD on the permit? Yes. Whether they would approve it or not, I cannot tell you.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Kind of following up on Mr. Bryson, Ms. Wright, I guess, are there other options to help remedy this situation, or is it pretty much they need to tear down the shed that's crossing the property line?
Madam Attorney.
Thank you. So really at this point, the options are to sell the land, or he will have to tear down the shed. And because he won't be able to sell the property with that problem in place. And so the only option is the negotiated sale of the land, or the shed is removed.
All kinds of things, so we'll go with Ms. Hall, because she hasn't asked a question yet, and then we'll go with Mr. Kelly and Mr. Bryson.
I guess this is more of a comment that,
We're on questions, so I'm gonna cut you off.
Okay, well, I'll hold off.
We'll
on
remember the
comments,
comment,
okay.
Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Bryson, and then we'll make Mr. Smith do a motion so we can talk.
Thank you. And this is actually more of a follow-up to my question anyway. So assuming that we were to negotiate the sale and the sale were successful, would the lack of a permit be an obstacle to Mr. Baptiste selling to his interested buyer?
Madam Attorney?
So I have to say, I'm not sure that I can answer that question right now. My initial thought is that it would not prohibit the sale. However, it just kicks the can down the road for the next person in some ways. And if they got the permits, they would have the same problem. They could go to the planning commission, they could seek a variance, things like that. I'm not sure that I can fully answer that question. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bryson, do you have a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Would it be legal to just sell them the small amount of land that the shed actually rests on and have zero setbacks along that barrier? I know that that's not we try to have setbacks, but if we could get it where this person can own the land that his building is on, and instead of being 50 feet away from rusted Duck Creek, we're 48 and a half feet away from rusted Duck Creek, would that be legal to just sell him enough land that his property's on so that he can do this transaction and have another legally non-conforming property in the community, because we already have a few of those?
So, Mr. Bryson, so it would not you would not legally be able to do that. You cannot take a non-conforming situation and make it more non-conforming. And so really what you have to do is make it conforming. And so you have to do the full 7 feet by 100 feet. I understand where you're going on it, but land use code, you cannot make something more non-conforming by then, creating a piece of land that doesn't have the appropriate setbacks.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As much as it pains me to do so, I move that the Assembly adopt a motion to deny this application to purchase the property adjacent to Duck Creek in accordance with the motion passed at the December 2nd Lands Housing Economic Development Committee.
No, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any objection? I'm going to do something, well, I'll object for the purposes of a statement. Ms. Hale thing. We truly feel for Mr. Baptiste. And normally we can help if there's just one problem wrong, but unfortunately there's 3 main problems wrong. Number one, the boat shed is illegal. There was no building permits. If there was a building permit, then it would have been the city's fault, and we could have said, we can do with that. But because there was no building permit, it's an illegal building. And this is just the shed, it's not the house. The house is fine. But it's over the property line, so that creates another problem. And then the fact that it's within the setback of the Duck Creek. So all of those lined up together make it, as Mr. Smith says, unfortunate, but the motion has to go forward. And I don't even know where to tell you to go from this one, but with that, we have no objection, so the motion passes. And before you leave, Mr. Knight, you might want to talk to our attorney to see what your next path is, because I'm not sure. Take a 10-minute break. Madam Clerk. Remember that item that we removed?
So thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I guess this is my question for you. Are we doing the Alaska Coffee Pot before we're doing the consent agenda, item 21?
I am doing the consent agenda, item 21.
Okay.
Did we have another item?
Yes, under new business, you have number 33, the marijuana license for Alaskan Coffee Pot.
Oh, that's because I have the old agenda. Well, we'll do 21 before 33 because it's a consecutive.
I believe 21 was passed on the consent agenda, no?
No.
Oh, because it got pulled. Sorry, I was
Pulled and moved to
confusing
new
the,
business.
licenses, okay.
So item 21, University of Alaska Southeast request to lease CBJ property at Floyd Dryden for less than fair market value.
Madam Clerk, Madam Manager, do we need to read this?
The University of Alaska Southeast responded to the 2024 solicitation for proposals to lease space in the former Floyd Dryden Middle School. University of Alaska Southeast requested this lease be at no cost. If the Assembly leases space for less than the cost to maintain the facility, additional funds will need to be appropriated in order to cover the budget deficit. The Assembly Committee of the Whole reviewed the proposals and the Public Works and Facilities Committee rankings at the August 5th, 2024 meeting and passed a motion to authorize staff to negotiate with the proposers on space as per the ranking by PWC. On January 27, 2025, the Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee provided a motion of support to the Assembly for leasing space in Floyd Dryden for the University of Alaska Southeast. In accordance with CBJ Code 5309260, the next step in this public process will be for the full Assembly to provide a motion to negotiate with UAS. CBJ leases are authorized by ordinance after a Land, Housing, and Economic Development Committee review and Assembly public hearing. The memo in the packet of previous agenda item also includes information or recommendation for this lease negotiation request. The Assembly pulled this from the consent agenda, and so I think I'm gonna withhold my recommendation because of that.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My understanding, I guess, from staff and from you, and then when I've heard from you about University of Alaska leadership, that there's just maybe more to be discussed here. So maybe some more information forthcoming. But anyway, just maybe a need to slow the roll on this a little bit. So that was.
That is correct, Mr. Smith. Mr. Steininger and I talked to President Pitney on Friday, and it sounded like she needed to gather some more information just with her staff to know exactly what they wanted out of that space. And so she asked us for some more time. So that's why we think we should go back to the council and give them some time to look at it.
Very good. Madam Mayor, I'd move that we send this item back to the Committee of the Whole. And I'd ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, so moved. Okay, now we're going to, I have the right agenda. We're going to item 31. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is recommended protest of AMCO AMCO marijuana license number 25190, Alaskan Coffee Pot LLC, doing business as Alaskan Coffee Pot.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Excuse me, Madam Manager.
The CBJ Finance Department is recommending protest of the renewal of retail marijuana store license number 25190 for Alaskan Coffee Pot LLC, DBA Alaskan Coffee Pot. This recommended protest of license 25190 is for the following unpaid 2024 sales tax quarters: second quarter $32,334.37, including penalties and interest, and third quarter $30,023.88, including penalties and interest, for a total due of $62,368.25 as of January 31st, 2025. Fourth quarter sales tax is due January 31st and is yet to be paid at the time this packet was published. Copies of the notice sent to the licensee is included in the Assembly HRC and the regular Assembly packets. The protest, I would like to note that the recommended protest went before the Assembly Human Resources Committee to review. At this evening's meeting, Alaskan Coffee Pot did successfully pay the $62,368.25, and so they now only owe fourth quarter sales tax. And the Human Resources Committee made a motion to remove the protest if Alaskan Coffee Pot pays their fourth quarter sales tax by Monday. So if the body would like to follow it with the recommendation of the HRC, they would need to make that motion.
Thank you, Madam Manager. So we'll go to the chair of HRC to make that motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Assembly uphold this protest unless Mr. Markey pays the final quarter of sales tax by Monday, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. So with that, it looks like no staff reports. Oh, sorry. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Atkinson, I believe was the motion at HRC to also include the interest and penalties because the fourth quarter was late filed?
I believe that was the motion, Mr. Bryce. It was, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson, for making the motion through Mr. Bryson. You made it in committee, yes, you did. So anyway, so that was all part of the motion, so we don't need to vote again. Anyway, so now we're moving on. Any staff reports? Madam Manager.
Thank you. I would like to, with the body's indulgence, talk a little bit about future meeting dates. You've received a number of different polls. I'm going to start with a future meeting date for a listening session on the Huna Totem lease process. If you recall, we just hosted 2 open houses on the, CBJ hosted 2 open houses. Huna Totem and NCL were at both of those open houses. In total, we had 170 members of the public attend those, and we are collating all of those comments for you, so you will have a hard copy of the different comments from the public on that. However, when we kind of first started talking about the lease process with the body, we also talked about doing a listening session. And so the clerk has polled the body with some potential dates for a listening session. I believe that February 18th was a front runner as a date. There's also been some feedback from the body that we've had a lot of public comment and public engagement on this issue, and maybe a listening session is not necessary. The committee of the whole is another date for a possible listening session. My concern just is that we stack your committees of the whole with so much true work. Regardless, we would be bringing to the committee of the whole an update from Huna Totem, their response to the public input, and that would still be an item on your agenda. So what I'm looking for now is feedback on the body's appetite for a listening session and whether or not that needs to be combined with the committee of the whole or scheduled before as a separate meeting.
What say the body? Ms. Atkinson and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm ambivalent on whether we combine it with the cow or not, but I do think it's hard to have too much public process. And so if we have a listening session, it certainly can't hurt.
And when would you like said listening session? What's your choice?
I could do either. I'm available on the 18th, or we can combine it with the cow, but I would look to the deputy mayor on that one.
Mr. Kelly, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you. Ditto?
One thing that we hadn't talked about, and so I'm going to put Mr. Bryson, sorry to put you on the spot. We could do the listening session in the lands too, but I don't know what the agenda is for that night.
Madam Mayor, I'd be more than happy to host a listening session at the Lands Committee meeting.
To be honest, I can't hear it, either you or him very well because it's just echoey today. Can you repeat that?
Madam Mayor, I'll be more than happy to host a listening session for the Lands Committee.
Madam Mayor, Madam Manager. I'm getting tired. Madam Manager.
Thank you. I did confirm with the land manager that he could shift the agenda around to accommodate that. So we will proceed with a listening session. And then the second scheduling question, and this, I don't need you to land on dates, but I just want to, we did talk about doing a Eagle Crest joint meeting in March to give them time to digest the report from Mr. Duncan. I had originally thrown out March 6th as a good date because that's the Eagle Crest Board regular meeting. However, that week you have both a Monday meeting and a Wednesday Finance Committee meeting. I find that it's a busy week when we have 2 evening meetings. So I know that 5 of the 7 Eagle Crest members would be available on the Wednesday if you would be okay with rolling the Eagle Crest meeting together with the Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday, March 5th.
What did the finance chair say?
I have not been able to connect with the finance chair on this topic. Generally, she,
We have acting chair Bryson that night.
Oh, I'm sorry, acting chair Bryson would be most interested to hear
That's
your
the
feedback.
finance chair I was talking about.
Yes, we will have time if we need to include it on the February 5th finance meeting.
Thank you for
Oh, the
letting.
March?
Oh, wait,
I'm not the acting.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're doing next.
I thought they
I'm doing
said,
it in 2 days. Sorry, I'm getting my months mixed up. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. I am chairing the finance meeting in 2 days. Are we putting something on that agenda? Is that what we're discussing here?
No,
Okay.
we're waiting for March, correct?
March is good.
Yeah, so, sorry, my bad on the dates.
Thank you for your indulgence on this scheduling issues. I got the feedback that I need.
Okay, as long as the finance chair for March 5th is fine with it. I think everybody would be okay with that, rather than having 3 nights. Anything else you have to confuse us? Okay, with that, we will go on to assembly reports. So the mayor's report, I don't really have anything other than I went to the Filipino installation of new officers, so they have a brand new board, and it was nice to see a great stretch of young people to old people. As they said, Uncle Dante is still on the board, and some very brand new folks on that board, so it'll be an interesting time for the Filipino community. They're gonna have a good time, and the food, of course, was always delicious, and I saw a few of you there, so that's always good. But other than that, just been busy. Mr. Bryson, oh wait, sorry, committees, I need to go home. Committees, we don't have our finance chair, so committee of the whole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I heard everyone did a great job at the Committee of the Whole. Thank you for addressing all those meaty topics on a very full agenda, and then I apologize I was not able to attend. So since I wasn't there, I can't give that great of a report, but good work all.
Perfect. Lands, Mr. Bryson?
The lands meeting included the Clinton and Ida requests for the Floyd Dryden use and the UAS use of Floyd Dryden that we just discussed previously.
All right, Public Works is Ms. Hughes Gandes, who is gone. Ms. Atkinson, Human Resources, you did some work today.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We looked at the Historic Resources Advisory Committee and concerns that we were having with that, and directed staff to work on their charge to make them more effective in the future. We also discussed Airport Board and concerns that were coming up on that, and we may follow up with a joint meeting with the Assembly to discuss those as an entire body. We also introduced, for information only, a ordinance establishing ranked choice voting for municipal elections here in Juneau. And lastly, we made some appointments to the Youth Activities Board, if I may.
Go ahead.
I move that we appoint Missouri Smythe to a Youth Activities Board General Public seat for a term beginning immediately and ending August 31st, 2025, and to a full term beginning September 1st, 2025, and ending August 31st, 2028, since this term ends within 6 months of appointment, and to appoint Lindsay Wold to a Youth Activities Board General Public seat for a term beginning immediately and ending August 31st, 2026, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, they are appointed. All right, so now we go to committee or liaison reports and comments and questions. Mr. Bryson.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The hospital board met previous Tuesday. We're going to see a letter that they are submitting. I believe it's going to Search. Search has made a purchase, and the hospital board does not believe that they followed all of the rules in making the purchase. Any purchases in the medical field require certificate of need. Search is able to operate without a certificate of need at this time, and it puts them at an advantage against Bartlett. So Bartlett is writing a letter to I believe the delegation, state delegation, and to the CEO of Search to say, hey, we've noticed that we don't believe this transaction satisfies the legal requirements. And the hospital also discussed that emergency room certificate of need. I'm sure everybody over there at the hospital is very happy that that came in today. Do that ER or the emergency room renovation. Short-term rental task force met last week. We did the data dump. We're getting all the information, how many are out there housing, what other cities are doing. There's a ton of information, and I believe the next meeting is on February 20th. Is that correct, Mr. Barr? Short-term rental task force.
That's correct.
If you would like to join us for that. And there is a finance meeting Wednesday at 5:30. I'll see you guys all there.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The chamber met January 8th and discussed all sorts of chamber events that are coming up and planning those, as well as talking about their letter to oppose the Board of Fish proposal. The Assembly passed a resolution against last month. And the LEPC also met January 8th. Lots of talk about some emergency manager hiring for Bartlett, as well as CCFR fire management that's been hiring as well, and updates on FEMA meetings that are ongoing. And that is all I have.
That was very quick. Mr. Steininger.
The Parks and Rec Advisory Committee met on January 7th. They had discussions on updating their fee schedule, raising a couple of fees to bring them in line with other fees charged. So like getting them in line with state park fees, things of that nature on commercial use. They also had an updated discussion on their budget request to go to the manager's office, and some discussion on how they would like to propose to use those increased fee revenues. The Eagle Crest Board had several meetings over the last month to discuss the Duncan report. The outcome of that, of course, we heard from at the last committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Yes, the Juneau School District has met several times in the month of January, including the Joint Facilities Committee meeting where the Zonta Kahini Playground was discussed and is back to the drawing board. They've also had their Finance Committee meeting and the Combined Site Council. That was Thursday, the 23rd. A work session for the budget, a retreat on the 25th, which very sobering with the funding situation at the state as well as declining enrollment. There was another meeting a work session on the budget that I missed on the 28th. Juneau Commission on Aging, they had their presentation to the HR committee on the 6th of January, and then their full meeting on the 21st, where they're really advocating to move forward with being able to utilize the Murray Drake building, but understand that it's at least another year out. And just in the comment section, I'd like to comment on the goal that we passed, the one under community wellness and public safety, advocate for programs that strengthen families with children age 0 to 3. And just the comment that we are doing childcare and helping fund parents as teachers to kind of take this to the next step. Assemblymember Kelly and Bryson are willing to work with me on a potential resolution to advocate for potential parental leave for our youngest citizens. And that would be something, if we did pass a resolution at this level, then advocate at the state level for that. So just a sense of if my fellow assembly members support that without an official vote, if that's something we're good to move forward on. Nods of heads, thumbs up.
Any objection at this time? Go forth and come up with something great.
Okay,
and then we'll object. I'm just kidding. Sounds good. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. The Southeast Conference Committee on Solid Waste met on Mr. Bryson's birthday on the 8th. They basically kind of, mostly just highlights were basically just kind of a round robin of different things that are going on in the different communities. I thought it was interesting that Sitka has currently 27 per 1,000 people driving EVs, and now they're basically consulting with us on how to dispose of EVs that have reached the end of their lives. The next meeting of the Southeast Conference is going to be in person, or the Southeast Conference Solid Waste Committee is going to be in person later this month at the when the Southeast Conference meets here in Juneau. The Juneau Coalition on Housing and Homelessness met on the 16th. One of the highlights from that is they were talking about the Crisis Now kind of pilot that they have going on, where they have a clinician available for field work. It's my understanding, if my notes are correct, that it's 7 days a week, usually during the day from 9 to 6. But they are tracking when calls come in for service in case maybe those hours need to change. Travel Juneau met on the 22nd. They discussed their budget and plans for the coming year. There was some discussion on basically Travel Juneau's role in advocacy, since they had attempted to weigh in on the Ship-Free Saturday ballot initiative, but were asked to refrain. And we kind of talked about kind of supporting the basic mission and the importance of that, of basically trying to bring people here, bring independent travelers here and to focus on that. And they also will be looking for a new chair. Q Pierre is currently termed out as chair, but may stay on in an ex officio role, and they're looking for, from their partners, they're looking for new people who might want to take a more active role on the board. As far as community events I attended Choice Fest on the 17th. When they recognized me, they promoted me to representative. But don't worry, I don't have any plans of leaving this board. I attended the legislative welcome, which was very well attended, not just by legislators and staff, but I felt like I made more connections with members of my own community. So it was great to see so many people from Juneau here for that. I don't need to elaborate on the Philcom installation. The food there is terrific. I think the mayor said the rest. And then I attended the reentry simulation on the 29th. It's a very educational experience. There was legislators, legislative staff. Assemblymember Hall was also there. It's a very interesting kind of insight into what people have to do post-incarceration in order to try and live the life that we expect of them.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the last Docks and Harbors board meeting, they made some recommendations on some ordinance for projects that we saw tonight. They also adopted and moved forward the docks and harbors budgets. JEDC met, they appointed officers. I have those names, but I'm not going to say them now. The Title 49 Task Force, just FYI, next meeting is next Thursday, February 13th at noon in Chambers. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for being so quick. Anyway, any staff have anything else? All right, so remember, it's National Engineers Week next week. So thank you to all our engineers, and it's Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, and it's was pretty cool for having a group of high schoolers bring that forward. So with that, nothing further before us. We are adjourned.